All right, everyone. Hello, hello. Here we are for a very interesting chat conversation. So, for anyone who is coming in and doesn't know, who didn't see my video earlier, basically, I have the author of Escaping the Cauldron joining us tonight. And so, kind of started us a little bit early so we can kind of get everyone together, just so I can make sure that I know what the hell I'm doing first. But whenever she pops in to join us, we can get that show on the road. I hear a bird. Yeah. Look! Bill! Oh, he's flirting. What are you flirting? Oh. He's flirting with the fireball. Come here, Bib. Yeah. It's Bib. Hi, Bib. That's Bib. Here's my good little pigeon. And he's wondering where Fireball Wife is now. It's right here, babe. You gotta hush your beak while we're talking. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I know that our friend has to join us whenever she's ready. Don't exactly know when she's gonna be ready, but I do know that. Oh, there she is. Hey, hello. There's Gwyn. Can I invite you to chat? I think I may have to go like this. There we go. Oh my goodness, why do I have 1,000 different people here?
Oh, there I am.
Okay, wait. Hi, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
Here we go. I don't know if your mic is on or anything like that, but
let's see. I don't know how this works.
Okay, you guys hear? Okay, in that case, it is.
Can you hear me?
My headphones, for whatever reason, that don't want.
Okay, you guys can.
Welcome to Technology, Part 5 million. Okay, there we go. Can you say something so I can see if I can hear you?
Hello.
Hi, okay, great, we're good. Okay, cool, great. This only, you can tell I go live very often. But anyway, so as I was kind of saying with people getting in here and everything, a while back I talked about a book called Escaping the Cauldron by Christine McGuire, which is a book about kind of a journey from being a witch to being a Christian. And this here is Christine McGuire, and she's here to tell us all about her book and how her views have since then changed since writing that book, which is very interesting. And so, Kristine, I don't know if you want to say a few words, introduce yourself, and get that ball rolling, but I figure we just jump in.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Christine McGuire. I go by Gwyn. That is my pagan witch name that I adopted in 2016 when I returned to the craft. And it was gifted to me by one of the goddesses that I honor. And so, yeah, so I was raised in the church. I was raised in the evangelical church, Methodist, and that kind of thing. And but always, from the time I was a kid, I was always drawn to witchcraft. I always had a real spiritual sense in the world and that kind of thing. But I didn't actually start exploring witchcraft until I was married, had kids, and things like that. And I discovered some books that just answered some questions I'd been having, because I was questioning a lot of things about my faith and about Christianity and about the church and God and that kind of stuff. And so I started looking into witchcraft. And it took a while before I actually took the jump from being a Christian into being a witch. But it, it felt right, that being a witch was the right thing for me. But because I had been, I was in my 30s by that time. So there was a lot of guilt involved in that too, a lot of wishy-washy. And my kids were little and I'm like, am I damning them all to hell because I'm practicing witchcraft, that kind of thing. So that's essentially, how I went from being a witch after about 8 years back to being a Christian, which a friend of mine calls my Christian retrograde. And
That's a good way to put it.
And then I was in about 2000. I wrote the book when I went back to Christianity, because it was especially in the evangelical church that I was part of, which included like Assemblies of God and things like that. Sharing your testimony was a big thing, And so I had started a blog. I was a writer, and so I was sharing my testimony as it were on this blog, and it evolved into a book that was then picked up by an agent who sold it to Charisma House, and it got published. It never went very far, never got very wide. It's honestly surprising to me that people still know about it, because that was what, I guess 12 years ago now that it was published. Yeah. And but yeah, my intention, and I don't know, maybe I'm like starting too early with this, but my intention at the time was not a bad intention, because I had really struggled for the time that I was a witch with that questioning, that wishy-washy, am I being sinful, am I going to hell kind of thing. And I didn't want other Christians to have to deal with that. So if they were having that same kind of I guess dealing with that kind of questioning, that kind of trauma, that emotional trauma, so I just was sharing my testimony in that book and trying to give some of the truth that I had at the time, but yeah, so I don't know. Does that make any sense?
No, yeah, that's great. That is a perfect rundown. It kind of leads me into the first question I want to ask, although I guess I should slow my roll a minute, because I feel like, I was like, oh my God, the guest thing, and then just kind of got frazzled and dove like 5 miles ahead. But in essence, I did want to say at the beginning, again, before I got dishwasher brain, was thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being willing to talk. I know that we're all here because I did find your book, and I found it because someone else had recommended it to me. And so like here on our corner of the internet, we take Christianity and witchcraft and smash them together for many reasons, but also mainly for a very political reason, right? Because one of my big reasons is Paul in Corinthians and 1 Corinthians, he says God uses the weak to shame the strong and the foolish to shame the wise. And I'm saying, well, God's now using the witch to shame the priest. Because boy, oh boy, is the church a hot ripping fucking disaster, right? Excuse my language, but so...
Hey, no, I swear like a sailor, so no problem.
We're all in good company here then. But yeah. So when I was kind of, talking about it, someone said, hey, read this book as a testimony of why this is actually bad and such. And so I did read your book, and there were a lot of things that I did really appreciate about it. The main thing I appreciated was how much you emphasized that pagans and Wiccans and witches are not bad people, because I have read many books in a similar vein that absolutely did try to paint anyone interested in this stuff as some kind of horrible, terrible person who's out there to just like ruin the lives of other people. So when I read your book, I was like, at least Gwyn is really, really cool and really, willing to say, hey, don't like freak out and hate these people. But with all that said, it is really interesting to, as you were saying, that kind of wishy-washy, because to chart that throughout the book was like, oh boy. And so I guess to start there, when you were writing that book, you mentioned that you wanted to kind of spare people from having to do that dance as well.
Hmm.
And just out of curiosity, did someone like approach you or like encourage you to write that book? Like, did others come out and say like, yes, you should do that, and and that'd be great? Or
No, actually, and I saw a question in there. Am I a Christian witch? Am I a Christian now? No, I am not a Christian. In 2016, I fully embraced myself as a witch, and I happen to be a pagan witch. So I honor Akati and Hera, and I worship other deities. But I just wanted to make sure that people weren't confused because I've got nothing against Christian witchcraft. But I'm no longer a Christian. Um, so let's see. Did anybody encourage me? No, I felt like because, like I said, because testimony was such a big deal, and because I was a writer, it just made sense to me to start sharing my story through the written word. And as I mentioned, I started a blog at that time. Originally, it was called Kristine Remixed, and then it just was christinemcguire.com. But I started sharing my story there, and I started getting a lot of people emailing me, writing to me, chatting me, whatever, telling me that they had been going through a similar thing. And they were encouraging me to continue telling my story, right? And so originally, I wanted to self publish the book, which I actually did a teeny tiny little, it was almost like a devotional kind of version of the book. And um, then through some bizarre circumstance, because I used to watch, the 700 Club, Pat Robertson, and all those peoples. Um, I I forget. I think I called in and commented about after I'd watched somebody's saved from witchcraft or whatever. I'd commented that I had a similar story, and about 2 months later, I got a call from the 700 Club saying, "Hey, we want you to come and share your story." And I was like, okay. And so I was on the 700 Club with my now ex-husband, telling my story, and it just kind of bloomed from there and went from being my little self-published book to I was contacted by another person who was a former pagan witch, occult practitioner, who said, "Hey, would you share your story in my book?" Because I'm collecting some stories from ex witches and pagans and things like that, and would you want to share in my you know in my book? And so that's how I met my agent, because she was the agent for this particular individual, and she basically sold our books at the same time to the same company. And so that's how I ended up having a professionally published book.
okay, so that's really interesting because like I was wondering like especially when I heard that you had gone back, someone commented that you had deconverted again from Christianity and gone back to witchcraft. But like I went to Google and try and find, and all I could find was like these really old articles from like 10 years ago where you were giving the old testimony. So I was like,
Hmm.
oh my god! So that's why I was like very very excited when you when
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
reached out. I was like, was that
Yeah,
on
it's
there?
probably because I don't, I deleted it basically, that entire blog.
Yeah.
And I don't I don't go professionally by Christine McGuire anymore.
Mm.
My podcast, I'm Gwyn. It's Three Pagans and a Cat, which I started with my family about, I want to say we're going into our seventh year now. Um, and that started around like 2018. So anything I've written since then has been under the name Gwyn.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I
Okay.
never did anything under the name Christine McGuire that said, "Hey, fuck that, I'm a witch." you know. So,
Okay, yeah, yeah. No, no, that okay, that makes a lot of sense. I will not lie. I was kind of confused. I was like, wait, this name Gwyn,
mhm.
but okay, I understand.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes a
yeah.
lot of sense.
And the reason that we took pagan names or pseudonyms at the time, it was basically, for my ex-husband, it was a pseudonym, was because he was also exploring from Christianity, he was exploring Druidism. And so we
Oh,
were all
that's really
kind of, we
interesting.
started the podcast, because my kids are both pagan. I was becoming a witch again, and he was looking into Druidry. And so we thought, my God, we'll just do this, podcast, and we'll just talk and, share. And people started listening, and it got kind of grew from there. But he had a very Baptist mother. He came from a Baptist background, and he did not want his mother to know that he had stopped being a Christian. I say stopped being a Christian, but he never really did, I don't think. But he was exploring Druidism, and he did not want her to know. So it was his idea to use pagan names, or and for me, it was a witchcraft name that I had already adopted, because I'd already done, I'd already basically cleansed myself of that old religion. I guess I think somebody said have a reverse baptism, I suppose. It was kind of like that, and dedicated myself to the deity that I was had been drawn to for years. And I took that name at that time. And so it made sense to me, just like, okay, we're going to be three pagans and a cat. Well, I'll be Gwyn. So
Okay.
that's how I've been known since then. All of my pagan and witch friends know me as Gwyn. They don't know me as Kristine.
Okay, okay, that makes a lot of sense because like I know that I started being like, oh man, it's like the response I'm like the analysis I made of that book. I'm like, I feel like I'm responding to someone that really effectually doesn't exist anymore. So that's where I was like, oh damn. So I gotta
No,
be like,
no.
oof, my bad, sorry.
No, no,
um,
seriously. I was really glad to run across that. I'm not going to lie. I was like, holy shit. I can't believe anybody's still actually talking about that thing. But it made sense. It made sense that you would talk about it because you wrote a Christian book. You're a Christian witch. You wrote a book about Christian witchcraft. And that's part of the reason why I was following you. I've never lost interest in Christian witchcraft.
mm.
That was actually a part of my journey as a witch before I, went back to Christianity for that retrograde. And so I've always been interested to see how Christian witchcraft has been evolving, because at the time when I was involved, it was still relatively new, for Christian witchcraft, for Christian witches to acknowledge that they were still in the church, but that they were practicing witchcraft themselves. They were still very hidden. And I think there was maybe 2 books available at the time,
Yeah,
and one
I do remember
website,
that.
you know. And so I've always just kind of kept my eye on it, especially once I returned to witchcraft, just to see how my sisters in Christian witchcraft are doing, you know. And so I'm glad
No,
to see
yeah,
y'all are
yeah.
thriving.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely I remember like I when I started getting into this when I was like 11 because you tell a kid that hey magic's real, oh boy, and I grew up loving fantasy and all that, so I was like hell yeah. But I remember like as I got a little older I kept so desperately looking for resources and there really was only like 2 books. Neither of them really were like academic. Neither of them were had like the chunky like actual exegesis history, all of that. So it was like I kind of feel like we're all just going off of vibes and like
Hmm.
even at 14 I was like I don't like that. I don't know. I feel like that's probably a little you got to have a little strong or something than that. Um but yeah, no, those were the wild days of like spellsandmagic.com, which is like, yeah, the powers of cryokinesis to freeze an ice cube. And it's like, what? Huh? But so yeah, with that said, I will say like one of the things in the book that I ran into a lot was Wicca. And so I know that like in the past 20 years, the discourse around Wicca has completely like done a 180.
Hmm.
And like many of us, I feel like, especially, when we were starting in the early 2000s and, up to 2011, 12, we're talking about Wicca. That's the entry point for so many people.
Hmm.
And it's like, looking back at it now, like hindsight's 2020, but with that entry point, how would you say, the specifically Wiccan aspects steered your understanding of witchcraft and has it changed at all since then?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, it really has. I mean, I started out with reading Scott Cunningham's the Solitary Witch book, and I realized that, this is a path for me, but there's so much that was wrong in those early books. Like, good Lord, I loved the spiral dance, right? I loved
Mm.
the spiral dance. It's very huge in the Wiccan community, but it is so wrong. There, and even Starhawk herself will say, yes, I acknowledge that the history that I put in there is wrong. And so there was a lot of questionable resources used in Wicca, or in those books that were teaching Wicca. I don't think they're, you know, I think they did a lot of borrowing from native cultures and things like that, which I think people now who are Wiccan are trying to move away from, maybe a little bit. Well, we're trying to encourage people to move away from that. But I think the biggest thing was back in, 20 some years ago, for Wiccans, that the name was synonymous with witch, right? If you're a
Right.
Wiccan, you're a witch. If you're a witch, you're a Wiccan. And that's not the case anymore. I think that's probably the biggest change that I've seen over the years, is that you can be a witch without being a Wiccan, and you can be a Wiccan without being a witch. You know, there are a
Right,
lot of
yeah.
Wiccans who do not practice witchcraft.
Oh, that's
It's
interesting.
yeah, it's strictly a religion for them, ritual and a deity worship and things like that. And they don't practice witchcraft. And then there's a lot of, like I said, there's and there's Wiccans who call themselves witches. I don't. Am I making any sense? I feel like I'm
No,
just kind
no,
of
no.
rambling.
I gotcha. I gotcha. And I can still hear you, by the way, but Belok's being very distracting, so I'm gonna see if I can like wrangle him and put him away. But I will kind of put back. I didn't realize that there were Wiccans who weren't witches, because I was under the impression
Mhm.
that like the cornerstone of Wicca was like the craft, you know? So that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it was considered the religion of witchcraft for a long, long time. When Gardner first introduced it to the UK, and then it came over to the United States. But yeah, people started veering away from that, and I honestly think it's because of the solitary path that kind of deviated away from covens. Because Wicca was originally very coven based.
Right.
And when Scott Cunningham, I'm just sitting here going along, when Scott Cunningham came along and introduced the concept of a solitary path, I think that's when people started realizing, oh, hey, I don't have to do it this way. I can, I can follow my own path. I can do my own thing, and I don't have to answer to anybody, you know. And
Right.
I think, and so that's where I think kind of came along the idea that not all Wiccans are witches, and not all witches are Wiccans, and not all Wiccans practice spellcraft.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I do like that does kind of open up some interesting like conversations about like what what does it mean when people go that kind of individualistic solitary route in something like a faith practice, right? Especially like all of the faith practices we know in mainstream Western society are so community focused, right? You have to be in a church or in a coven or some kind of group, and if you're not, then it's like you're doing something wrong. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I wonder about the ramifications of that. But that aside, I feel like that's a massive conversation for a different time.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, no, I remember too, like when I was young, people being really confused when I said I was a Christian witch, not only because of the Christian part, but just they were like, if you're not a Wiccan, you're not a witch. And it's like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting. And also, I feel like there is a lot of credit to give Wicca because it kind of was that stopover. It was like that bus station spirituality between like Christianity and all of the other different pagan faiths people are now in, right? Norse and Celtic and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely, looking back on like my first books that were just like, yeah, work with this spirit from this culture that you have no business working with and do that. And I was like, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, no, do not ask Baba Yaga to help you like she's some cute puppy. Don't do that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
um,
Exactly.
so it's definitely interesting to see how that's shifted. And with that said, you mentioned that you honor and work with Agati and Hera and all that. So are you strictly Hellenic, or do you still kind of go in
Um,
different directions?
I go toward the, more in my some of my practice is more what's part of my heritage, but which is not Greek. So I do work with Frigga because I do have some Norse heritage on my mother's side, some Germanic, kind of things. But no, I just was really drawn to Hecate and to Hera, and for some reason, all the Greek deities. But yeah, no, it's the one thing I am drawn to several different deities and different pantheons. Um, but the thing I think is most important is one is I don't work with a deity if they're part of a closed religion,
Mhm.
um, unless I've been invited by a person that is part of that religion to come and participate and be a part of what they're doing, which that really hasn't happened. Um, and pantheons like the Greek and the Roman and the Norse, those are not closed. And so if one of those deities reaches out to you, which is how I got involved with working with Hecate and with Hera and Artemis and Aphrodite, um, they invited me to work with them, right? And so it was my decision of whether I wanted to work with them or not. That's kind of how I approached that. For a long time, when I returned to being a witch, I didn't work with any deities.
Mm.
I was kind of deitied out, you know. It was just like I'm just gonna be a secular witch and just do witchcraft. And so I did that for a couple of years, but then I was really drawn to start working with deities again, and it's become a very important part of my practice. I'm not going to say that being a solitary is easy, because, like you said, it's harder to find community um, and be a part of community. But that's on the individual to find a way uh, to be part of the pagan community or the witchcraft community, and that's where online stuff has really helped. And the podcast that I'm part of, obviously, still, we've built a little community that is still going pretty strong, surprisingly, 7 years later. So
That's really good. No, yeah, that's great because especially like I mean I feel like TikTok is an interesting beast here because it's easy to just find a bunch of people, but also there's so many people that it's kind of hard. So it's like if you can carry that community for like 7 years, that's a big deal. Um, but what was I thinking? Someone else asked actually, and so on the topic of dating, someone did ask, what is your relationship or perspective on the Abrahamic pantheon now? If you still have any thoughts on that, is that something you want to talk about, or?
well, that's part of the reason why I didn't want to work with deities for a while. I'll admit, originally I had some harsh feelings toward the Abrahamic deities. Jesus, I have no problem with, but his dad, I feel like he's a little harsh. Um, but yeah, it's probably just religious trauma, getting over,
Mm.
religious trauma. It took me a long time. Uh, Once I really embraced myself as a witch and really shed myself of my former religion as a Christian, it took me a long time to get over um, some of that teaching that really I just really couldn't gel with. I mean, I can. One of the things that encouraged me to actually just embrace who I was as a witch, because I was still writing. Believe it or not, I have a second book out there. It's it's called Insider's Guide to Spiritual Warfare, and it was written 2 years after Escaping the Cauldron, because I had a 2 year. I had a my agent was trying to get me to do more books. Um, and but even while I was writing that, I was questioning everything. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I wasn't going to church. I wasn't, doing any of the Christian things, that you're supposed to do. I was just writing this book based on what I knew from, a lifetime in the church and my experiences, when I still felt like, okay, I'm a Christian. And then as it slowly, everything that had bothered me from the beginning was still bothering me, So I'm going out there, I'm writing this book, I'm speaking at churches and traveling around and doing interviews and all that crap and going, why am I doing this? But, people had paid me money. People were expecting me to talk to them about this stuff and share my testimony. And I felt trapped, honestly. I felt trapped.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And so by 2016, I was just, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And so I just, and then my father, basically what happened, the reason I decided to just take the jump and just shed myself of that former religion and embrace who I am, my father passed away. And my dad,
I'm sorry.
oh, thank you. It was back in 2016, so he's been gone a while now. But he was gay, right? And so I struggled with that throughout my life as a Christian. I found out when I was 16, and of course, being part of an evangelical church, that was bad. Homosexual, that bad. And I really struggled with that. And what I did not realize is that I was also struggling with internalized homophobia because I am myself am queer. Took me a long time to figure that out, but my father passing and realizing that a lot of the people I had associated with in the church would say he was going to hell. That was a big push. But then the other big push was that my son came out to me as trans, and he went from being the child that I knew as a girl to being a boy, right? And I knew because I had been hearing this at the church I had been attending at the time, how bad that was. And I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't be a part of that system, that belief, that judgment, that hatred toward people, honestly. And so my oldest kid, who was already a pagan, had been for a long time. They, I should say, are Norse pagan. They were like, Mom, if you don't feel that, if that's not your religion anymore, if you don't feel that way anymore, it's okay to change. And I think that was the first time anybody told me it was okay to change my mind, that I didn't have to stay with the religion that I had been raised in, that I didn't have to stay a Christian if it didn't feel right to me anymore, if it didn't bring me joy and make the world beautiful to me, which it didn't. Witchcraft does. Witchcraft makes me feel better about myself. It brings beauty to my life and makes me see the beauty in others. And so, I'll get off my soapbox now. I don't even remember how I'm answering this question. But
listen, that's the beauty of conversation to go this place. No, yeah, but I think that's really beautiful that your kids were able to be like, hey, you're not obligated to do what everyone told. That's really cool. So I'm glad that, you were able to kind of get to something that is actually resonating with you and is actually authentic to you. But yeah, with that said, I mean, again, I call it dishwasher brain because it's like I get so many thoughts at once that I'm like, oh, it's like that little loading wheel on the iPhone. It doesn't work anymore. But okay. So with that said, I mean, like I had a lot of questions as I was reading the original book, and one thing, so as we're talking about how Christianity doesn't feel right for you anymore, there was one part of the book that stuck out to me a lot, and that's that at one point you started talking about how you can tell when the Holy Spirit is talking to you, and I'm interested to know what that meant for you at the time, and also if you think that the entity, or if there was an entity that you were feeling, do you feel that that was the Holy Spirit genuinely, or was that maybe something else? Was it yourself? Was it anything like that? Some
Yeah,
insight
no,
on that.
I genuinely believe it was the Holy Spirit as the church understands the Holy Spirit. I mean, I believe that Jesus and God and the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. I believe they're entities, they're real spirits, they're real deities. And I believe at the time, because that was the understanding I had of the spiritual world. That was that was my spiritual worldview. That was how I understood spirit. I absolutely believe, because I was open to that at the time. So I absolutely believe that as a Christian, I uh, I was speaking and understanding and hearing and being guided by the Holy Spirit. When I moved away from that, when I moved to opening myself to listening to other deities and other spirits, it shifted away from them to pagan deities. I don't see any difference personally, because deities are, they're individual spirits. They have their own, they're part of different belief systems, or and they're different individual types of personalities, but they're all individual and unique. And because I no longer believe, obviously, that the Christian deity is the one true and only, um, because there are many. And I think for me now, I understand that yes, I was communicating with the Holy Spirit, as I understood the Holy Spirit at that time. But I guess take that as you will.
No, yeah, I get what you mean, and that's where I guess so. We got one of these comments in here. Francie saying, "I'm interested to hear her thoughts on the evangelical egregor slash egregores." And so when you say the Holy Spirit as I understood it, that's interesting to me because I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how much of my content you've seen, but us in the Christian Witch Circle, we do believe that, especially in the evangelical church, the thing they're talking to is kind of their understanding of God made manifest, and that the real God has kind of dipped a while ago from that situation and been like, oh, what the hell is that, right? So I don't know what you think about that. Do you think that's accurate? Do you?
Yeah, no, that honestly makes a lot of sense. My kids and I, well, I should say my kid, because I'm Ode, my oldest, is the one who is on the podcast with me. And we've talked about egregores. I believe that happens in in the pagan community and the witchcraft community, as and other spiritual uh, religions, including Christianity. Um, because if enough people put enough thought and enough belief and into a spirit, that creates that manifestation of that spirit. Doesn't make that spirit any less real, right?
Right.
We did this little experiment on. It started as an experiment and became this whole thing, because we were talking about egregores. And we said, okay, we are going to see about a deity for this podcast. And it was a deity that we called Dictinus, and who would be about diction and speaking and clear communication and things like that. And over time, as we all were talking about it and people were writing, poems about Dictinus and bringing this belief, we do actually have an egregore that we know as Dictinus who watches over our podcast. Now the question is it a manifestation of all of our belief to create this spiritual being known as Dictinus, or is it some other spirit who came along and said, "Hey, I'll be Dictinus for you," you know? And so it could be either way. And so I feel like sometimes that's a possibility with egregores as well, is a deity who resonates with the desires and the feels and the emotions and the energy of a group of people, will take on what it is that they're trying to create in their understanding.
No, yeah, absolutely. And honestly, you put it really well, especially with like when we think about egregores, it's easy to think like, oh yeah, they're following a fake god that's not real, but like no.
Hmm.
I mean, from my own experience, like my interview with the God series, where I kind of just like play spiritual tourist basically and go talk to different pagan deities, angels, saints, all that. I found that egregore, and it was not very nice, and it was not great, but it is real, and it was very insistent on quashing anything that spoke against the way it wanted to roll. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh shit, like this thing needs to go. Like this thing
Hmm.
is not good. But with that, I mean, when I think of books like, say, Christine Cobes Dumes's Jesus and John Wayne,
Hmm.
that book I feel like is almost a history lesson of the creation of that egregore and
Hmm.
how like it manifested from like that white straight male hegemony and their need to stay on top, and it has just been their mascot ever since.
Hmm.
So it's really really interesting to see someone from that scene kind of also get out and
Hmm.
then find these areas and be like, oh wait a minute. Um, that being said, hi, we're doing this again. Where am I going? Where am I going? That being said, though, I feel like also when I was reading the book, like I remember I was reading it and I was like, this person grew up evangelical right away because a lot of the stuff, like I grew up Catholic, and so a lot of the stuff I was like, hey, as a Catholic, hey, wait a minute. But also, so do you, I mean, do you have a different understanding of God now? Because I know when I read the Bible and I look at it and I look at what these people following that egregore is saying, I'm like, I don't think you read this book.
Hmm.
I don't
No,
think you.
I do, I do think that the Jesus of the evangelical church, and the American Jesus, that is understood in the culture is very different from the man who is written about in the New Testament.
Mm,
Um, and one could argue, was the historical Jesus a true person? I think whoever that person was a real person, you know, and I think in a way he became an egregore, the everyone's belief about him. So yeah, so I think he's very different. I think the Jesus in the Bible is very different because I don't honestly think they teach Jesus in the church
mm.
as much as they teach Paul and
Yeah.
Paul's
Yay.
interpretation of Jesus, if that makes sense.
No, it 100% does. The amount of times I get Christians like quoting scripture, but they're like, Jesus said, and then it's like, I don't know, Romans or First Corinthians or worse, Deuteronomy, which is
Mm,
like, babe, you're not even in the right time period now. We're not, hold on.
yeah.
Wait. So it's this kind of lack of biblical, and like, this is the thing about egregores that's really frustrating. A lot of these egregores thrive based on what the people who manifest them already know.
Hmm.
So if they are not really well versed in the material that the actual original manifestation is based on, that's how we end up. I'm thinking also of like Hades and Persephone, where like all of a sudden Persephone is some super cool girl boss with a hot, dark mafia husband or something, and it's like,
Yeah.
what?
Doesn't
That's
match the
not that's
mythology, does it?
not really. So it's like, hold on, wait a minute, how did we get here?
Yeah.
But they will fight tooth and nail to tell you that's how it is, and it's like,
Hmm.
that's the same thing as evangelical Jesus to me. I don't know. That's like,
Hmm.
well, hold on, guys. You got to read the material first. You got to, okay.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I guess also, oh, this is another thing which was really interesting to me. So now that you are working with deities like Ikati again, another part of your book that was really interesting was when you mentioned that, like, when you kind of had your Christian retrograde and you went back, you mentioned how suddenly, I think Artemis was like this very spooky evil out of nowhere.
Hmm. I wouldn't,
What
I
happened?
think what happened was because I had, at the time, I had dedicated myself. I record that in the book. I dedicated myself to Artemis. I had these
Mm,
really intense meditation sessions with Artemis, like in such a way that it was like I was in her presence and like it felt like a physical type of thing. Um, but yeah, when I went back to the church and I just like, See ya. I didn't do a proper goodbye to those deities I had been working with. And so she was pissed, you know? And so she showed up in my room and was like, you know, what the fuck? And she was pissed. And yeah, that scared me. I mean, you know, you get a deity who's really upset and she's kind of intense, you know? So yeah, that scared me a bit at the time. But I was scared by so much. At the time, I was a ghost hunter, and I got myself involved in a lot of spooky crap. And so I think it all just, you know, and I allowed myself to be affected by a lot of different spirits. I wasn't good at spiritual protection at that time. And so I was just being beaten, if you will, whether you believe in that or not. I was experiencing a lot of scary shit. And excuse my language, I'm sorry, I should be careful. But
It's okay.
it's, you know, she let me know she was upset. Let's put it that way. And when I came back to being a witch, you know, and embraced being a witch again, she approached me and she was like, "What do you think? Are we working together?" And she was willing, but at the time, that was during my time when I wasn't willing to work with any deities. And so she was like, "Okay, you know, well, I'll just hang back." And she and I don't really work with Artemis so much as I now work with her or her Roman counterpart, Diana. But she's still there in the background. She and I just don't work together a lot because I think I was really drawn to work with Hecate, right?
Mm.
And so that she is my main deity. She is the one that I work with the most. And Hera, interestingly enough, came along right before I had no interest in working with Hera at all. But she kept being like, "No, you need to, in fact, it was weird. I hope you don't mind me trailing off on this weird little story.
Yeah, no,
I
yeah,
was,
go ahead.
I was in a pagan bookstore, friends of mine own, and there was this little bitty Hera statue, and I was like compelled to buy this thing. And I'm like, I don't want to buy a Hera statue. I got no, I just, you know, I have no interest in working with Hera. She's spooky. She's scary. She's, you know, mean. And I didn't want anything to do with her. But then like a couple months later, I was doing, I also do tarot reading. And so I was doing tarot for right after Thanksgiving, at my friend's store. They were having this big event. I was walking around the store and there's a little bitty Hera statue still there. And I was like, "Ugh, I'm supposed to buy this thing." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I bought this little bitty Hera statue and I was like, "I'm not working with you, but I will honor you since you really want me to buy this thing." So I would just burn a little incense, say hello, and go about my day. But then I found out my then husband, now ex-husband, was cheating on me. And Hera got me through that entire situation. She was there
Damn.
to get me through that entire situation. Because if anybody knows about cheating spouses and,
I was
you
about
know,
to say, yeah.
yeah, if anybody knows what it's like to deal with a cheating spouse and to go through that kind of heartbreak, it is Hera. And so she became very important to me through that process of going through my divorce because she is the Greek goddess of, among other things, marriage.
Mm.
And she also, in retrospect, you know, she also is the goddess of divorce. Now, you don't really think of her that way. That's a more modern interpretation of her. But yeah, she got me through that incredibly difficult time. And yeah, I don't work with her a lot, but she still has my complete honor because she helped me during that time.
No, that's a terrible thing to find out. So I'm sorry again.
Yeah. Well,
'Cause
it's
that's
okay.
yikes.
It was for the best. And yes,
Mm.
someone said she wanted you to know. Yeah, she wanted me to know because it was completely out of left field for me. Um, but yeah, that was the story of getting involved with working with Hera. So that's been my kind of experience with other deities is they make themselves known, and they are just as real as any other deity, any other spirit,
Right.
you know, that
No,
is out
yeah. Absolutely. And I think so fun fact, I got banned from the Greek pantheon and the Roman pantheon.
there. Okay.
So that was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And by fun I mean really scary. But anyway, so what
They're pretty
happened
intense.
is that's why. So actually, when I was reading the book, my first thought was, okay, these goddesses must have been trickster spirits if they were randomly just like becoming demonic looking out of nowhere, or however I was interpreting the thing. But that makes a lot of sense how you describe it, because that is the second option. The Greek gods are like, you uphold your contracts or you face the consequences of breaking
Mhm.
them. So when I was starting my Where the Gods Left Off, Interview with the Gods series, and this is another reason I got a chip on my shoulder about Wicca.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know much about how to research religions yet or deities. And so before I got into an interviewer, I would look up some things about them, get their like myths or basic lore, but a lot of the sources were Wiccan.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I would set up like an altar or something with like gifts and things like that as like a thanks for their time. And I didn't understand anything about actual Greek practice of like cleaning your hands first, of the incense, of the all the different epithets and all these things. So I was just going in there, and I also had still a lot of like honestly really shitty beliefs
Mhm.
that I didn't realize I had not deconstructed about religion and other gods and all these other things.
Mhm.
And so I talked to Hecate, and Hecate was really cool. I have all the respect in the world for her. There was also Hades, which I definitely think I caught my understanding of Hades at the time, which was not very accurate. But and then also there was Apollo, and Apollo kicked my ass so righteously. I can't even begin to like get into it. That remains one of my most insane top 10 craziest moments in this religious experience. But I remember that exact same feeling of intensity. Like I could feel it. He was pissed, and he was like physically pressing. And he was
Mhm.
like, "Who are you? And what are you doing?" And I was like, I'm just trying to have a conversation, sir. But I was very arrogant and I was very haughty, because all of a sudden it felt like he had, like, not like backed off, but been backed.
Mhm.
And I felt like I had Archangel Michael here. But the problem was that they were silent to me. I couldn't hear anything going on between them.
Mhm.
And I was like, haha, God showed you. The next day, when I tell you, I woke up to the most insane shitstorm. I was like, Hermes had something to do with this too, I swear, because the way that got around and the way I was humbled so fast and learned a lot very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. They will
So
do that.
I definitely think like God and Apollo both were like, oh, hold on, she'll learn a lot better this way. And they
Mhm.
both kind of were like, bang. So that's why when people are like, oh, God will always protect. I'm like, God is the first one to drop you in your own consequences. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
God didn't
Mhm.
protect me from shit. God was like, yep, go ahead. So, but that was that. And that's where I learned, like, no, the Greek gods are not to be trifled with. They are
Yeah.
very, very serious spirits, a lot more serious than I think a lot of people, like, readily admit to themselves. But they are
Mhm.
very, like, to the letter, here we go, this is what we're doing. So it's
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
Very much so.
But okay. So that makes a lot more sense. Not a trickster spirit, just a god that was like, hello.
Yeah.
I thought we had like another 6 months of this contract.
Exactly, exactly. Of course, at the time when I was writing the book, I was writing it from, an understanding of being a Christian, and that Christian mindset. So to me at the time, oh my God, they're all demons, kind of thing. And that that fear that is pretty inherent in that kind of teaching
Mm,
was definitely part of what I wrote about, because that's where that fear was coming from, that I was writing from that place.
mm, absolutely. And with that said, ironically, a lot of people, I feel like there's a shift again happening with Christian witchcraft,
Hmm.
and that shift is also kind of becoming like a crossover episode with the Luciferians, the Satanists, the Demonologers, where suddenly we're
Hmm.
realizing, hey, wait a minute, we're kind of like two halves of the same scale here, and we should
Hmm.
probably, instead of fighting one over the other, we should probably try to come back over here.
work together.
So a lot of, yeah, a lot of Christian witches and demonolators are suddenly like, hey, I'm actually working with demons. I'm actually working with angels. And it's very interesting to see. But that being said, have you ever encountered like the Goetia or any of these other demons? Have you ever felt that energy or anything like that?
No, I really haven't worked a lot. I have friends. I have a really good friend who works with Goetia and has a very intimate relationship with one particular demon spirit from the Goetia. Who, if she loses something, she's like, hey, can I get some help? Um, but no, I haven't really had a lot of experience with that. And again, I think that has a lot more to do with my own hangups that I'm still holding on. It's still
Mm.
shedding. I have worked with Lucifer, which that took a bit to be okay with. But yeah, I've worked with Lucifer, but I haven't really worked with other spirits. Um, as far as like, that would be considered demonic, by traditional standards.
Okay, and so which makes sense. I just know the ones I've talked to and the ones I like in my own whatever the hell journey I'm doing right now. That started with Lucifer, and like I've met several of them now, and it's very. I don't know about your experience with Lucifer, but I know for me it was very much like all of the spooky spooks I've ever felt, like the genuinely terrifying experience. I don't find it in them, So it leads
Yeah.
me to be like, what are these spirits that have genuinely spooked me? Have they
Hmm.
been human spirits? Have they been fae? Have they been just, I don't know, actual little tiny like impish demons that
Hmm.
exist for no other reason to cause trouble? I don't know, but what would you say you felt with Lucifer versus any of those really spooky times when you were like, hunting ghosts and all that kind of stuff?
Hmm. I with Lucifer, he was very chill, honestly,
Mm.
and very patient because of my hangups from Christianity and the bad rap that he gets. Um, but it was part. He became really a big part of basically a ritual and a divination session that we were doing for a friend who was had been experiencing a curse, and he was helping us with that. Um, because it was kind of a weird situation where an angelic spirit had been forced into a role of binding someone with bad luck, and it was just this weird situation, and Lucifer helped us figure out what was going on and release that spirit and release the individual, and so that was a very enlightening kind of situation. But no, I think when I was dealing with ghost hunting and what would seem like demonic spirits, I think it was more dealing with either angry human spirits that were still hanging around, or really intense emotional memory, place memory, that can be confused with active haunting. The other thing is, I have a friend named Devin Hunter who's an excellent pagan author, and he's got this really good book called The Witch's Book of Spirits, and he talks about all different kinds of spirits, including low vibrational spirits, which I think is a lot of times what people think of as demons. They're low vibrational spirits, and it's important, especially when working with a lower vibrational spirit, to enter into a contract, you know,
Mm.
and make sure if you're going to work with a spirit like that, make sure that you have a contract with them and that they're willing to honor it, and that you understand what you need to do to get away from that contract when it's time, and and things like that. So does that make sense?
Okay, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like those low vibrational spirits are like the equivalent of like shady business partners, where it's
Yeah.
like it'd be better to have good business partners who are going to honor their contracts, but sometimes the only loan you can get is from the loan shark,
Yep.
and so that's the risk you got to take.
Yep,
But
yep. Because I mean,
so
let's face it,
that's
there's all
interesting.
kinds of spirits in the world. There, we do have the good neighbors, the fae, and I do not, subscribe to the belief that they're sweet and innocent and little, pixies. You read any of the fables and myths and stories about the Fae and the good neighbors, and they're terrifying. You do not
Mm.
mess with them. And so yeah, I think sometimes, like you were saying, is it the Fae? Is it a low vibrational spirit? Is it a human spirit? And there are, some people believe, it's not really something I've explored, but some people believe there are infernal spirits, that are just not nice. They're just evil, you know. So yeah, I guess it depends
Yeah,
on
yeah.
what belief system you're coming from, maybe.
Yeah, no, and that's where kind of like you know how they say the demon presidents and princes, they have legions of demons that they order around. That's
Hmm.
what I think those like little evil jerk
Hmm.
kind of spirits are. It's just those little guys that follow the orders of the bigger guys. And I
Hmm.
feel like the bigger guys aren't like giving orders as much as they are like herding sheep, basically, because
Hmm.
it's like their job is to manage that and release them when they are, set to
Hmm.
release them.
Hmm.
And so in my philosophy, like they and God are always working together because in Christian thought, it's actually God who's the one that directs the flow of angels and demons.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Well, wasn't was it? It's been a while since I've read the Bible or done any kind of Bible study, but wasn't Satan essentially the original prosecutor, essentially? So
yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Like the title Satan just means adversary,
yeah,
the accuser. And so literally his whole job is to just poke people and see if they crumble. And then he can go to God and be like, look, that person sucks. I mean, that's the
yeah,
whole book of Job in a nutshell,
yeah.
you know? So,
Hmm.
but which is interesting I like that because it shows how people who had a monotheistic religion had to then grapple with, okay, well, if there's only one God in charge of everything, where did the evil come from? You know?
Hmm.
So it's fun to look at that in that lens. But okay, so that's squares that question away because I just remember reading it and being like, "What was it? I don't know if any ideas were like demons. I don't know." And this is another question, I guess, in that evangelical need to pin everything that feels bad as demonic,
Hmm.
but at the same time, they're so quick to say the devil comes as an angel of light. And
Hmm.
so I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, which is it? Is the devil all the things that feel bad, or is the devil all the things that feel good? Is the devil the actual God that you follow? Because you seem to put a lot of stock in him. I don't know. What do you think
Hmm.
about that?
No, I think that's a really good question because yeah, everything in that evangelical quarter, especially, I remember from when I was, in that church, if it was bad, if it was tempting, if it was, any kind of a temptation, struggling with food addiction or bad feelings, depression or marriage trouble. It was always caused by a demon. Everything was caused by a demon, right? If not Satan himself. Sometimes it was Satan himself, you know. And it was like, Satan's coming after you. You gotta, gird your loins, resist, kind of thing. Um, but yeah, that's a really good question because if everything bad is being caused by demonic forces, then how are you being tempted by an angel of light? You
It
know?
doesn't make any sense.
And I guess people would say that, and I probably believed at the time, yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't read my own book in 12 years. So a lot of this stuff, I don't even remember half the stuff I wrote in that thing. Um, but as far as what I said, so it's interesting to have this conversation going, oh yeah, I remember that. Um, but yeah, I think the idea of the angel of light is, like people would have assumed the deities that I was honoring at the time and working with at the time were angels of light, if you will. That kind of concept of, something beautiful and seems good on the surface, but underneath, and that's how I presented it in the book, if I'm remembering correctly, is it seems beautiful and good on the surface, but once you get into that deep underbelly, it's, it's evil, and it's dragging you down, and hardening your heart, and things like that. And, you know, so
No, yeah.
that's that kind of belief system that I was born into, that I was brought up in, and that I returned to when I became a Christian, which it's really funny. Um, the last thing I wanted to be when I went, when I stopped, when I went from being a witch back to being a Christian, the last thing I wanted to be was an evangelical, but I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better, and I just went right back into that mindset. And what, got me in trouble was that I see somebody saying, I used to ask too many questions. That's what got me in trouble, with my, I didn't like the things I was hearing and the things that I was seeing. And I questioned it constantly. And I remember at the time, AOL, this is how old I am. AOL was the thing. When I was first questioning everything, and I was in a group of Christians, and I was asking my questions, right, about women as leaders in the church, and why is homosexuality, why are people being, told that they, aren't welcome, and how is this, I was asking all these questions, and I literally had a pastor in that group tell me, you just have to stop asking questions and have faith. hmm That's what
Oh,
drove me to,
it's
that's what drove me to the
yeah.
library. And that's what got me started looking at other religions. And that's when I found, it was a book called Ariadne's Thread. And it was a book about goddess worship. And at that time, that was like 1994, 90, I want to say 94, 95. Um, and that response that I got and kept getting was what drove me away,
And
both the first time and the second time.
that's like so infuriating to me because it's like all of these questions are opportunities for really awesome philosophical conversations,
hmm
really cool like discussions of morality and things like that. And there's also a line in the Bible that I will see the no offense to well, full offense to the shit kickers, but I will see these shit kickers throw this line around that, oh, my people perish for lack of knowledge, and then in the same breath they're going to turn around and be like, don't ask questions though.
hmm
What?
hmm
So
Yeah.
like that blows my mind, and it's the same thing like when I do like my Christian witch stuff, and I'm like, hey, I've done the work, I've done the digging, I've gotten the sources, I've done this stuff, here it is. And they go, you're just trying to justify witchcraft. And it's like, bitch, if it's literally true, that's not a
hmm
justification, that's just the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so I don't know. The patience I have with these people is like razor thin at this point because there's only so many times you could say stuff and then have them just like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I see
all that
someone saying
aside,
this is bringing back bad memories. I hope this is not triggering for you. So, because
yeah,
that
I'm sorry.
I don't want people to get triggered over this, because I understand how that can be, because I went through that, a lot of that, in a lot of my recovery, if you will, from 2016 till now, has been dealing with that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, no, and that's like I find a lot of the people who come to Christian witchcraft are the kind of folks who like they have that kind of trauma. They went full swing to the other side, and then they kind of eventually like this swung back in the middle almost.
hmm
But yeah, that trauma, that the fact that there is religious trauma, the fact that this is a concept pisses me off as it is. But
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't know.
And
I
I don't
got.
want you guys
Oh, sorry.
to think that I have anything against Christians, you know. I just have a problem with the kind of Christianity that I have always experienced. Does that
Oh
make
no, we all
sense?
do too. It's okay.
So,
We're all on the same page here. And so that's where I was really lucky to grow up with a mom who is not only an immigrant from Southern Europe, so they already have a very relaxed form of Christianity,
yeah.
but was specifically Catholic. And Catholicism in Southern Europe is just like basically drinking wine and like passing by a shrine, a really cool shrine of Jesus on the street, and being like, "Sup, Jay," and then just like keeping it pushing, like,
See,
you
that's
know.
kind of
So
how we do our thing. So
yeah, so it's very much like you go to Southern Europe. Every intersection has a shrine to some saint or Mary or Jesus as a protective thing
yeah,
for people driving like crazy people like they do. And it's the whole vibe is so different. Like when I went to the South, I went to North Carolina. It was very like hills have eyes, like I'm about to get like kidnapped and put in a box kind of
yeah,
Christianity.
yeah.
And like Southern Europe is not like that at all. It's just like, oh, there's Jesus just chilling on a mountain somewhere. Like, so it's totally different. And that's where I also had a lot of questions though, because the more I looked at it, the more I was like, huh? And one time my mom, she wanted me to do my what is it, confirmation. And I was like, I don't see why I have to do that. Seems stupid to me. I can't rationalize why I should have to publicly confess that I'm still believing in God when I'm doing that right now.
Hmm.
But I kept hearing all the stupid viewpoints of the official Catholic Church, like not the chill, easygoing version we knew.
Hmm.
And then I was like, Mom, go to confirmation. And she's like, no. She goes, no, because all you're going to do is fight with the priest and get kicked out in 5 minutes. So I was like, okay, but like, so I don't know. I definitely found a home in the Episcopal Church because they seem very, very friendly to mysticism. My priest thinks tarot cards are really cool. They
Nice.
understand the concept of, like, I explain, like, I'm a Christian witch, and that's what that means. And as soon as I explain it, they're like, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. So it's like, there is a section that is more friendly to it, but a lot of them,
Yeah.
you hold up an amethyst and they shit their pants. I don't know, but so it's interesting the different various degrees within one religion called Christianity, how different people get.
Mhm.
But that said, I had another thought and I lost it. Where did this thought go? I don't know. It left. It's gone. But okay. Oh, that's what I wanted to ask. Another thing. And so I'm sorry that everyone's kind of asking comments or questions in here, but we got this panel going maybe a little bit later. But and I hate to keep reminding you of stuff you said 12 years ago because I know if someone kept reminding me of shit I said 12 years ago, I'd be like, stop. But
No, you're good.
but yeah. So another thing was a big thing to me in witchcraft is like getting the social philosophy correct, like getting like your why down. And so, a lot of us, I feel like when we start in witchcraft, the first thing we gun for is like, ooh, the crystals and the herbs and the spells and this and that. But we kind of miss like, why am I doing a money spell? What do I want? Is this actually something I need to be doing right now? Like, do I want to try and throw basil in a jar so I could become a billionaire? Like, what are we doing? And so one thing that really stuck out to me also was when you were kind of denouncing your past craft. You were saying things like, yeah, when I was a witch, it was all about me, and it was all about what I wanted, and it was, I could just do anything I wanted, and, all that kind of stuff. And that's where I was kind of like, well, if you're doing that as a Christian witch, I feel like that's kind of, in Christianity, when you're supposed to be all about everyone else, and all about the other, and the community, and all this kind of stuff, it's kind of like, well, yeah, these philosophies are kind of chafing on each other. But I do wonder, like, because I was reading, I was like, did someone tell you to say this? Did someone edit this book and make you put that in? Because I don't feel like you really, I don't know. But maybe, I don't know. So that's what I'm saying. How is you still think the same? Do you have a different idea? Was that your accurate idea at the time?
Honestly, I honestly don't remember. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I know that now I believe that, which spellcraft is all about intention. And sure, of course, it's things that are important to us, to our family, to our circle of influence. But is it driven from a place of selfishness? No, it's driven from a place of need. And, I think at the time, I probably felt like I know that people were like, oh, witchcraft is all about power and things like that. And I chafed about that because it's like, no, it's really not. I don't know that I necessarily believed it then, but what I definitely know and understand now is that it is about autonomy and it is about personal power and taking responsibility for your own actions. And, understanding that when you put your spell out into the world, you are responsible for that outcome, you know? And so it's important to understand what it is that you want. You don't just throw something out there willy-nilly. You have to put thought in and into the process and narrow it down to, what am I doing this for? What is it going to benefit me? And is it going to affect someone else? Because I mean, let's face it, if you do a job spell that because there's a particular job that you want or that you need because you need money, that ultimately, no matter what you do, is going to affect someone else because that other person needs a job too. So it comes down to, I don't think that's selfish. I think that's just realistic. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And understanding that your spells are going to affect other people. Now you want to try to minimize the impact, if you can, but some people do, some people don't, I mean, but no, I may have interpreted it at that time because I was dealing with a lot of guilt. I may have
Mm,
interpreted it at the time as being selfish, because I know that for a big part of my life, the church was always like, if you do anything to praise yourself, to focus on yourself, you are being selfish, and that is not godly, right? And so I think that's probably the energy with which I was coming from at the time, the understanding that I was coming at the time, that if I did these spells to benefit my life, my children, my friends, my family, that somehow I was coming from a selfish place. And but I've learned from that. I've grown from that understanding, you know.
yeah, no, no, okay, okay, that makes a lot of sense because I remember being like, I'm not gonna lie, okay, and again, it may feel weird that I'm talking this way again, also about someone that I feel like technically doesn't exist anymore because I don't think you're the same person you were 12 years ago.
No, no, I don't
But
think so either.
I don't think any of us are honestly.
I hardly remember that
But
person, to be honest with you.
yeah, oh, it's so weird. Even like for myself, I look at my videos from 2 years ago and I'm like, who is that? So 12 years is like, oh man, this person's like, goodbye. But still though, I just remember like reading it and kind of feeling sad because I could tell reading it that you still really had a connection to the things that were mystical and to the things that were deeper than just go church, read Bible, go home. Like
Hmm.
I could, and I was like really sad. I was like, this person clearly wants direct connection to the divine like so badly, and is
Hmm.
like spending all these pages trying to convince themselves that they don't. And
Yeah,
so it was
I think
like
that's a
oof,
really good
but
analysis. I think that's a really good analysis. I think that's very true. Hmm.
I mean,
And I
but
think
that's
that's why I
and
am today a witch again,
yeah.
because that is an intrinsic part of who I am. It has always been who I am from childhood to now. I've always been a witch. It just took me a
Right.
long time to figure it out.
Right. And like, especially when you got those kind of like cultural and social roadblocks of everyone saying, no, actually, it's really bad. It's like, I don't know, it's like telling a bird all their life that, like, actually, it's a sin to fly, you know? So it's like, well, what the hell? That's what they were meant to do.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so with that said, there's a lot, and I see a lot of stuff online. I get people all the time telling me, oh my goodness, check out this person's testimony, that person, and this is how I found your book, right? It was because I have like kind of a series running where I don't want to be a confirmation bias goon. Sure, let me read what other people on the other side are saying.
Hmm.
And they said, well, this person has this testimony. And the more I read these testimonies, the more I'm kind of like, what what happened there? Very rarely do I find someone who genuinely like was not meant to be a witch and was
Hmm.
actively harmed or did worse as a witch.
Hmm.
But sometimes those happen, but for the most part, I don't know. As an ex witch turned Christian yourself, can you give us some insight on like what these people are kind of experiencing that push them back into that space? Because I know I got plenty of theories, but you
Yeah.
are actually lived that experience.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, obviously, and I've mentioned it before. It honestly, I think, had a lot to do with guilt. I think because I love being a witch. I really do.
Mm.
It is how I view the world. It is how I interact with both the natural world and the spirit world. It is who I am to my core. And to deny that and try to be something that I'm not is hard. It's hard. And I always found being a Christian challenging from the time I was, first accepted Jesus in my heart as a 6-year-old child. Because I always felt like I was doing it wrong. I always felt like God was judging me, that I couldn't be good enough to meet up to the standard of being a Christian, that I was hearing about at church or reading about or whatever. And I I don't know. I think a lot of people who were Christians and then, and became a witch or went from witchcraft to becoming a witch, I just think there's a lot of, at least for me, there was just a lot of guilt. Because
Mm.
I just was like, hell is waiting, kind of thing. I think I didn't break away from that lifelong belief that I just wasn't doing it right?
Mm.
That I was under judgment all the dang time. And I think that's where this idea of, you want to be in doing the right, you want to be on the path that you're supposed to be on, but everybody's telling you you can't or you shouldn't or it's wrong or it's evil. It's scary if you are a people pleaser to try to buck what everybody's telling you. And I am a people pleaser. And that is something that has plagued me all my life. And it's why I was going around writing a second book, talking to people, giving this testimony while I'm sitting in my head going, can I go sit under the moon right now? Can I go, commune with my plants? Can I find the mystical part of this religion that will make me feel whole that I just wasn't
Mm.
experiencing, going to church. And so, yeah, I think I don't know. I think I don't even know if I've answered the question or if I've just wandered off again. I tend to follow kitten trails, but
No, no, I got you. And I think that does make a lot of sense. I know that like I don't want to say that like everyone is just lying to themselves. I do think
Mhm.
that like some people genuinely do like again
Oh yeah.
I've heard people who are like, no, when I got into witchcraft, I got like more depressed, I got more anxious, I got more snappy, and it's like, well, that's a sign that like this isn't free. And like it's
Not for you.
okay if like, if witchcraft
Hmm.
isn't for someone, that's fine, but it's the same if Christianity isn't for someone. As a
Yeah.
Christian, I don't think that everyone necessarily is meant to be a Christian in this
Yeah.
life,
I, I
And so it's
I think our culture teaches us, and that you have to have a religion and pick it and stay with it,
mm,
and especially if you're born into it, and I think that's where it comes for some people. I do know that some witches who went back to being Christians, it was because I know of at least one that I spoke to. She was listening to our podcast and she's like, I just don't think I'm supposed to be this. I'm going to go back to being a Christian. I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's because she didn't feel like her spells worked and she thought maybe it was all make
ooh,
believe, you know? So I think sometimes that, I think one is like you said, some people, they got depressed or they felt like they were being spiritually attacked or, things like that. But again, I just wonder how much of that is a root of anxiety caused by this idea of sin, you know?
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's where like my other like major theory for a lot of these people that go like running back is like I feel like they experienced something for the first time, got
Hmm.
insanely scared. And also, another thing is that witchcraft is really self directed.
Yeah.
It's insanely personal and individual. And there are a lot of people who really would like, some parameters, like little bowling aisles to
Hmm.
bounce off of and contain themselves. So organized
Hmm.
religion is great for them because it gives them those preset rules.
Hmm.
Witchcraft, you got to kind of, to an extent, make up your own rules and do
Yeah.
your own thing.
If you're
And
a
so,
solitary, yeah, there's some covens that are very strict and narrow, but
yeah,
yeah, for personal spellcraft, yeah, you definitely have to create your own parameters.
yeah. And so I think that level of responsibility also scares a lot of people.
Hmm.
And especially when you come into witchcraft with the kind of baggage this culture comes into, I know a lot of people join it because they think it is a source of power and they think, oh, I can be super beautiful with like 30 boyfriends and
Hmm.
$1 billion with witchcraft. And it's like, oh,
Hmm.
you're in for a wild ride, but okay.
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about this too on our podcast, is that sometimes, social media is great. Um, we can connect with each other in like we're doing today, but there's also a lot of pressure to, be like the person you're watching. And I think so
Yeah.
you get a lot of you see some of these spells on TikTok or Instagram, and they're gorgeous, and and they look so amazing, and you're looking at your setup going, wow. That looks much more powerful than what I'm doing. I think that people judge themselves. It's kind of like, grass is greener over there. I think that's a problem too, is that because we're only seeing a snapshot that somebody is putting out there for us to look at. We don't know what
Yeah.
is really going on behind the scenes.
No,
So,
exactly. And like, I mean, this is very like meta of me, but as a content creator, like, yeah, I mean, there are some times when I do have like a big ritual that's all set up pretty, and like
mhm,
I'll film B-roll with it to use on like thematic videos because
mhm,
people like pretty thing. And like, I
yep,
did do the spell, but I know people like pretty thing and all that kind of stuff. So you film it. But most of my spells are like literally just a pot of spaghetti, and I'm like, basil, bang, like it's already
mhm,
going in there. Might as well invoke it. I don't know,
exactly, exactly.
so it's nothing glamorous 99% of the time. But social media, like comparison, truly is the thief of joy for a lot of
Mhm,
people. And so it's another thing. I feel like that's also from people's Christian upbringing a lot of time. They watch
mhm,
everyone else, those super holier than thou, look at me, I'm the most perfect person in this church, and then they can't meet that standard. Then they go to witchcraft carrying that same kind of need to try and meet that standard. And it's like, well, if you don't have
mhm.
the money for 18 types of crystals, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, SOL.
Yeah.
But okay, with that said, like if there are, witches, Christians in between someone who were like waffling between that, do you have any advice for them? Do you have anything you want to like let them know?
Well, I guess I would say be true to what you're feeling. Like, if you are truly drawn to one over the other, it's okay to choose. You know, there doesn't have to be guilt involved one way or the other. If you have been practicing witchcraft, but you just feel it's not right for you, and you're not vibing with, what it is to be a witch, or what it takes to cast a spell, or working with other deities or whatever, that's okay. That's fine. And it's the same thing if you are a Christian, or whatever religion you happen to be in, and it's not feeding your spirit, it's not beautiful to you, it's not helping you become a better person, it feels like a burden. I think those are the questions you have to ask yourself. Is this more of a burden to me to follow this path, or do I know I'm meant to be here? Even when things get tough, it's still beautiful. It still feeds you. It's still, something you want to be a part of. So yeah, I think, I don't think you have, I mean, obviously Christian witches have proven you don't have to choose necessarily. If you have found a balance between your what you believe as a Christian, and the what you practice as a witch, because and you've managed to meld those together into something that feeds you, your spirit and is something you can put out into the world to better others as well, and bring beauty to your environment and to your circle of influence, cool, you know, that's awesome. But I think part of the problem with the wishy-washy thing is that we feel like we have to choose, you know,
Mm.
one or the other. And one is, or we get this idea that one is bad and one is not. And it's like, neither one is bad. Neither one is better than the other. They're just different, just different ways of expressing what you believe. And so I would say, yeah, just go with what speaks to you and what helps you live the life you want to live, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with everything you just said. And so, okay, yeah, no, and especially like with the, do you feel like you're meant to be there? Like, a lot of times people ask me, they're like, why are you Christian if you're a witch? Why don't you become like pagan? Just be pagan. And it's like, I don't know how to explain to you that like I feel at home with this God.
Hmm.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like again, for all the respect to pagan deities, I've met a lot of them and they're all very cool and
Hmm.
interesting and great in their own ways, but they don't feel like my family. God
Yeah.
feels like my family. So it's like and like it's like I don't know how to explain this to people. They keep asking me. It's like I can't just dump God because y'all think a witch shouldn't rock with this God.
Hmm.
Likewise, as a witch, I can't just stop that expression of mysticism and direct connection and like nature and everything else because you think that my religion should have nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
I found that witchcraft, in my opinion, is just Christian mysticism. Like Christian witchcraft is just mysticism with arts and crafts,
Hmm.
with tools and everything else, but the results are the same. The philosophy leads to the same place.
Hmm.
Be a better person, become comfortable with yourself. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's all going
Yeah.
to the same place no matter where you're starting from.
Yep.
So it's I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are just so damaged from being told that like there is one way and all other ways are wrong, but
Yeah.
even with like demonolatry, if working with demons helps you become a more confident, stable,
Hmm.
and strong person willing to advocate for others, then demons are great. As
Hmm.
far as I'm concerned, great.
Yeah.
So but there's that. And so I guess to kind of wrap all this up, I don't know how much time you have. I know it's 8 o'clock and it's late already. I don't want to, I could talk to you all day, I feel like. I feel like this has been a great conversation. And again, I really do appreciate you,
Hmm.
especially after seeing my snappy little shit eating video.
No.
You know, I was like, no, stop it, no. I was like, no. But yeah, so I don't know if like you want to keep going or if you
Yeah.
want to wind down, but
I mean, if
what
people
do you
have
think?
some questions that I'm able to answer, I can't promise anything. I'll do the best I can, but yeah, I can give a little more time if people have questions and if you want to do it.
Yeah, no, no, that's totally fine. I think maybe like a little bit longer, especially because I think I've asked all my questions, honestly, and again, I appreciate you answering them all. But I think now, if anyone else does have a few questions for you specifically, that would be cool. So
Mhm.
it's balls in your court, everyone. Do you got questions for Gwyn before we kind of say goodnight? The Marian apparition? I don't know. Do both of you attend church services? Gwyn, I know that you are not Christian anymore, but do you
Mm-mm.
have any kind of community covenant or anything like that?
No, I'm a solitary. I've always been a solitary as part of my practice. I did for a while. I was in an online coven when I was first learning Hecatean witchcraft. But no, I mostly, if I do ritual, it's usually with my children. Um, uh, some of it is, time and space. There is a local, you wouldn't call them a coven, but they're a loose group of pagans that get together, especially around, our sacred holidays. And, they do rituals and things like that. So I guess I wouldn't say I don't go to church or to a specific kind of gathering. But anytime I'm able to go and be with my people, whether it's at a conference or a specific ritual that is being held by a particular group, that is an open ritual, then I go and I'm a part of that. But otherwise, I am a solitary.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I know most of the stuff I do solitary. I go to my church, but like I'm a nervous little Nelly, and I always just kind of go for that hour and then skip because I'm like scared of people I don't know. So I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
bye. But trying to talk to them more. And it's nice sometimes. Like I don't know, I used to hate church so much because like I was literally 9, and 9-year-olds aren't tend to be a fan of church. But
Right.
now I appreciate like just like how it's easier to focus on working out if you go to a gym instead of doing it in your house, you go to a
Mhm.
church for that hour and that's all there is to focus on. And it's like really nice and calming, I guess. So I can understand the appeal now, but still definitely not for everyone, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But okay, so someone else was saying, do you have any views on Mary Magdalene?
Mm, not really. um, I think some of the understandings and theories about her are interesting.
Mm,
Um, her place in relationship to Jesus. Obviously she was the first person to see him when he, rose from the dead and all that kind of stuff. So clearly she's important. I think that's the thing that gets lost, especially in the evangelical
mm,
church, is the importance of women in the church, and they get downtrodden, if you will, from the
mm.
patriarchy. Um, but yeah, no, I think she was downplayed, which I think is too bad. And I think to really maybe for people who are interested in her, maybe the Apocrypha, the Gospels that are not associated with the traditional canon are better ways to understand her.
Right.
But
No,
otherwise,
yeah.
I don't really have any personal feelings.
Yeah, no, and actually that so other folks are asking about Christian figures like saints and angels, and now this is actually just now this is maybe a nosy about evangelicism because again I grew up Catholic where we were like like my mom has a statue of Mary in her front yard, all that kind of
Mhm,
stuff, and so it's just
mhm,
like what was the vibe around like angels, saints, Mary, all that
mhm.
when you were growing up?
That was considered idolatrous. In the evangelical church that I grew up in, you didn't work with saints, and you might call in the angels, that asking God to send in the angels to build a hedge of protection, I think was the official term, that kind of thing. But you didn't like interact specifically with different saints or deities or excuse me, deities, different angels and things like that. At least not in the evangelical churches that I was a part of, that would be considered idolatry in the circles I was in. And boy, wouldn't they be surprised now because I got lots and lots of statues in my house
Right.
now.
Oh, yeah. No, yes. I mean, I guess yeah. That is the standard because I always hear people be like, no, you can't do this and that, and like the Catholics then tie themselves in knots, like trying to separate veneration from worship, and it's just
Yeah.
like, oh man, we all have fun here in
Hmm.
Christianity.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but okay. Were you in one of those churches where even the cross was considered idolatrous?
No, we did have a church, a cross, but it was not something that you focused on so much as it was a reminder of Christ's sacrifice for you. I mean, we wore little crosses, and
Mm.
why that's not considered an idol, I don't know, but it's not. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a lot of interesting things. Like I know that like Catholics will even on the Feast of the Holy Cross venerate the cross specifically like the object, which is really interesting.
hmm.
And then meanwhile, there's the opposite extremes, like even the cross is like I know I have Jehovah's Witness family who don't wear crosses because they're like, no, it's very bad. I'm like, okay, but okay. Let me see. Do you think religious rituals are technically magic spells like communion in Catholicism and Orthodoxy, like the blood into wine and all that?
Well, I think it depends on your point of view. Sure, you could approach it that way. Um, but I honestly think with ritual and spellcraft, intention is key. And,
Mm.
if you are not coming at something, if it, I mean, obviously all form, it is a ritual, communion and things. It's a style, it's a type of ritual. Um, and so, but I do think intention and the reason that you are gathering to do this is, you know, a part of it. And if you are intending to do, spellcraft, if you're intending magic or some, some kind of a spell with your prayers or with your rituals, and yeah, it's magic. If it is something and it's something that you feel like maybe you're partnering with God in,
Mm.
or asking him, because like in my practice, I partner with the deities that I work with and the spirits that I call upon. I ask them to assist me with whatever the intention is. Um, but in some rituals, it's strictly to honor the deity that I'm working with,
Mm.
there, and so that's just strictly a ritual. So if you're having a ritual in, in a church or whatever, you're lighting your candles, you're doing your incense, you're singing your songs, that's a ritual. That's honoring the deity that you worship.
Right. Now, yeah, no, I understand, especially with that intention, yeah, because I do think that like I could look at mass and be like, that's magic, but like a lot of them are like, no, it's just what we do. So it's kind of like, I guess it depends, especially because there's no real intention of like what we're trying to do. Like we're not trying to achieve a goal here with
Hmm.
mass.
Hmm.
It just kind of is, and that
Yeah,
communion is just like unifying with God again. So I
yeah.
could see that absolutely. And someone else had a comment about, have you ever come across Asherah, the once wife of God?
No, I've really not interacted with a lot of like the Hebrew deities,
Mm.
or the Abrahamic deities much. I honestly mostly, for some reason, I attract the Greek deities. So, I work with the Greek deities mostly.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. I know even for me, like a lot of people are like, I think there's people kind of assume that all Christian witches work with Asher, and it's like, I don't know if I have like a broken, I don't know, unit box or something, if I am misshapen from the factory, but me and Divine Feminine just like don't
Hmm.
like. I'm just like goddess. No, I like my big tough god, and I like being a menace. So,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So it's like, not everyone kind of does with specific goddesses or even goddesses at all.
Hmm.
Um, we got a few. So there's thoughts on working with ancestors and then keeping formal altars up. And I think
Hmm.
after those two questions, we could probably call it a night. So
Yeah.
you can get back to your family. But yeah. So do you work with ancestors or anything like that?
Yes, we do have an ancestor altar. Both my parents and my brother and my grandparents are a part of that altar, and of course we bring in any ancient ancestors that we do not know. In fact, we just celebrated Samhain, not that long ago, just a week or so ago, and part of that celebration was to feed our ancestors, to make a meal for them and share it with them, light candles and tell them that we love them and we shared stories about them. So yeah, we definitely have an ancestor altar. Um, and then I keep altars up around my house all the time. I always have altars, and I actively light candles, incense, and sometimes even if it's just going by and saying, "Hey," you know, I always I have an altar to the earth because I believe that the earth itself is a deity. Because I am an animist. I think all things have spirits. Um, and so, I honor the earth and the moon and the sun, but I have specific altars to Hecate, to Hera, to Aphrodite, to Diana slash Artemis. um, and I have, it's funny because it's not really an altar. He's just kind of up there because I don't really work with gods a lot. But I do occasionally work with Thor. Obviously, I have an altar to Frigga. She guards my hearth which is my kitchen. Um, but I also have Cernunnos, which was a deity that my ex-husband was interested in, and I got him this little statue of Cernunnos, and I didn't want to just, when he left, I didn't want to just, say see ya. So I cleansed it, and he's up on a shelf, and every now and then I say hello, and maybe someday he and I will work together. But yeah, no, I keep altars up all over the place.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Me too. I feel like this is just like the plague that comes, or the curse that comes with being a witch, is suddenly every free space in your house is an altar. Oh
Yep.
no. Because yeah, I've got I call it a guest altar. It's like right by the door, but it's just like a little like god zone. And then I've got the
Hmm.
demon altar on the bar cart. I just put up my own ancestor altar this
Hmm.
year, and did the All Saints Day thing now. So it was basically the same thing as Samhain.
Yeah.
And then in my room is like my main tool altar. So it's just like, well, there's a lot of spaces that now are just dedicated to lots of pictures and candles and other
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
um, well, okay. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up for me. Is that solid for you, or do
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
keep
no,
talking well into?
yeah, no, I am getting a little, my throat's getting a little sore, but no, I've really enjoyed being here. I hope I haven't rambled too much, with and I've, answered the questions that you've been asking, to satisfaction. But I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, because it's funny when I first was, back into the craft, I got that book got put in my face by someone who is a friend and said my mother used this to beat me down, you know,
Oh
and she
no.
asked, yeah, and I was like, oh my God, because that's the one thing I did not want to ever happen. I never intended for that book to be used against people, and that
Mm,
has broken my heart, to be honest with you, and I have felt incredibly guilty that Christians have misunderstood the purpose that I wrote that book for in the first place, and have used
mm.
it to bludgeon people over the head and tell them that they're sinful and that they need to repent. And it's like, no, that's not it. Um, my goal at the time was always to show people love, and to help people who were struggling like I had been, going through that. It was really honestly for people who weren't sure what they believed and where they were going, and um that was the point of the book, not to throw it at pagans or witches, and hit them with this and say, repent of your sins, you foul creature.
Right.
um and so that has always bothered me. And so it was when I saw your video, I'll admit I didn't watch the whole thing. um, and I was like, oh my God, it's still out there and it's still doing the thing. And it's still doing that. And that's why I reached out to you, because I thought, oh my God, she needs to know that I'm not that person anymore. I don't endorse that book anymore. I burned my own copies of it. I do not encourage people to do. In fact, the person who was like, my mom uses this against me, I actually wrote a note in it and said, I'm no longer a witch. Dear so and so's mom, I'm no longer a witch. Stop using this book to hurt my friend.
No. Oh
And took a
yeah.
picture with her, so she could prove to her
No.
that yes, I had actually done that. Um,
No, because
so
that, and like that's the crazy thing, is like I know for a fact that a lot of those types of Christians absolutely picked up that book and said, "Look, more proof that we're right." And it's like, "Oh, babe,
mhm,
that's
mm-mm,
that kind of hubris, that kind of arrogance. It's not." And
yeah,
then now
yeah,
here we are, right? And now here we are. We're
yeah.
like, "Well, actually, no. Went back to being a witch, and there's nothing wrong with
Ironically,
that."
ironically, my former agent, she is now
Mm,
a witch. So yeah, she's a goddess
wow,
worshiper. So,
it's
but
almost
she's
like.
yeah, she's still a Jesus person too. But she works with the Sophia. So, but yeah,
Oh yeah.
so yeah. but yeah, no, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, to chat with you. I've loved it. I thought it was very interesting, and I look forward to really diving into your book, and we're going to talk about it with our listeners. And we would love any of y'all if you ever want to listen to our podcast. It's Three Pagans and a Cat, and you can find it on the platforms. And we talk about pagan stuff, so I don't know if that's with your jibe, but we talk witchcraft, we talk paganism, because that's who we are. But I just really appreciate y'all listening. And I think my initial fear was back years ago when I became a witch again, is that people would be angry at me. But I have found
Mm.
most people have just been really understanding. So
Yeah, no, and when that's why it's like, I don't know. I remember being like, I mean, I had a good deal of like salt after reading the book. I'm not gonna lie, not like, anger. I was just kind of like, oh man, more of this rhetoric when like I know what I know, right? So, but
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, but when someone said, "Oh no, actually, Gwyn's done a total 180 again," I was like, "Oh no," because now it doesn't feel fair. Now it's like, well, I'm putting all this heat down on again something that doesn't exist anymore. That feels like
yeah,
ass.
yeah.
To that end, I do want to ask. I mean, I've been kind of waffling. Like, do I take that video down about the book? Do I? Would you prefer that I take the video down? Because I
No,
mean,
no, honestly, I would prefer you didn't, because I think people need to know, and I will happily say, don't read that book. It's I want people to say, listen, this is not a book that needs to be used against witches and Christians and Christian witches. And that's not don't read this book. I don't endorse that book. I don't those are not my beliefs anymore. I have nothing to do with that part of my life. It's a distant memory for me. Sometimes it rears its ugly head, and
mm,
there is a part of me that's always worried that my publisher from that time is gonna like sue me or something. you know. But it never sold anyway, so who cares? But I don't even think it's in print anymore. But yeah, so yeah, don't take it down. Let people know that it is not a resource that would do anything but uh, fuel the people who don't understand what witchcraft is, what Christian witchcraft is, and so yeah, no. Um, but if anybody, and I think I saw somebody asking where you can listen to Three Pagans and a Cat. It's you can find it on if you Google the letter no 3PAAC. So the number three uh, PAAC. You can find it that way. Three pack is kind of our little shortened version. You can also Google Three Pagans and a Cat, and it'll take you to our episodes. Our website is threepagansandacat.fireside.fm if you want to go to the website. And then pretty much you can find it on any platform. We have over 200 episodes, so there's plenty of content to listen to. And we we have an episode we're doing bi-weekly now. So we're two episodes a month now. Um, it started out with my ex-husband, so if you go really early back, you'll hear him too. But yeah, no, I would love for you guys to, come check us out. Come visit me on my Gwyn of Three Pagans and a Cat, TikTok. I have a lot of fun over there. So just doing stuff and chit-chatting with people. So yeah, I'm not a big chatter, but believe it or not, but I do enjoy people's comments and interacting with people.
yeah, no, absolutely. That sounds great. I was about to say, I believe because I checked out your profile and like you have the link tree in there, and that's got
Mhm.
all those links as well. Yeah, so
Yep.
absolutely, everyone who's interested, check out Gwyn's channel, check out all of her stuff, all of that goodness, the podcast, everything. Show some support, especially because in this house we do believe that people change and that they should be given that opportunity to change, and they should not be held liable for people they no longer are.
Yeah.
So absolutely, and again. Gwyn, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate, first of all, you not having any hard feelings
Not at all.
Because
Not at all.
because I do genuinely feel bad because I know that like when I make those videos, I am very much like snappy, like ha ha. But then like sometimes you forget that there are real people on the other side of those books.
Mhm.
Some authors like John Ramirez get absolutely nothing from me because everything that man is about makes my whole skin crawl. But
I remember him. Yeah,
so
understandable.
like folks like that might know. But it is always humbling when I, be all snappy in my script and then I meet the real person and I'm like, oh no, wait, hey, that was mean of me, wasn't it? So,
Well,
but
don't worry about it. It's fine.
I appreciate your grace in that regard. And also, again, really love talking to you. This has been a lot of fun. This has been very insightful. And I will definitely, for everyone here who maybe is popping in late, I'm going to be re-uploading this to YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing back. So it'll be up there forever. And you can check that out on my YouTube. But otherwise, again, show Gwyn some love. And thank you guys for stopping by to listen.
Thank you, everybody. See ya.
And I'll see you guys later. Bye.